So thanks for joining us for the preservation planning for your community. When we were pulling this together, we were really trying to think of ways to make the information fresh, so we're not kind of going through some of the tools and hearing the same talks that we've had for a number of years. So we're focusing on our objectives really is to learn about the existing and new preservation planning tools, but how these communities can use them for emerging concerns in New Hampshire. And there certainly are a number of concerns that we're seeing and want to be able to utilize some of our tools to kind of piggyback what Dick was saying this morning, which I thought was very helpful and insightful. So we have a great panel here who have excellent experience in a variety of situations, so I do love that. We have Nathan Merrill, who is with the town of Stratham. He's with their Heritage Commission, and you're the chair now, is that true? Great, great. And so you have a lot of experience in the community, you grew up in the community. Excellent. Great, yes. And Becky, she was a long-term chair for many, many years, and sort of kind of got the commission up and going, I'm assuming. Is that right, Becky? Struggling, and you revived it. Excellent. So they have some unique perspectives on a kind of a more rural but still developmental pressure being on the seacoast and open space. So we'll be talking about that. And then we have Noah, who is with the Office of Planning and Development at the Bureau of Economic Affairs. And you've been with the state for a while and sort of see that bigger statewide perspective. Great, 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 great. And then we have Dr. Stephen Whitman, who comes from more of sort of a businessy or nonprofit-y background that can speak to working with a number of communities across the state. Great, good. So, what are the current issues that seem to have potential to impact our historic resources, landscapes, cultural landscapes that would threaten New Hampshire's character? And we came up with a number of ideas. Certainly we've been hearing a lot about the housing crisis, the loss of agricultural lands and open space we heard earlier. Tear downs and redevelopment is certainly something along the lakes area and out here. We're seeing at the state level weakening of environmental laws and how that might impact projects coming through. Loss of federal funding to states and towns, how that's going to impact nonprofits, but also just our infrastructure. And we have a little section on the myth that historic preservation policy might slow or limit development, when really if we're working together, it would not do that. So anybody here have some other ideas they'd like to throw out of some emerging issues that you're seeing in your communities that we haven't touched upon? All right.
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
Just to get a sense of the audience, who is a Heritage Commission member or a Historic District Commission member? Quite a few.
Excellent.
Any on the planning side, a planning board member, ZBA? Was. Past or present.
Okay.
Town staff? Got a couple over there. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. That's great. So I'm going to let folks talk to this a little bit in regards to housing and just our quality of life and density and some of those reasons. So I'm going to pass that off to the panel.
Great. Thank you so much, Stevie. So we're first going to talk a little bit about kind of general development trends. So the image you're seeing on your left is from the New Hampshire Zoning Atlas, which is showing that approximately 15.7% of the buildable land throughout the state, shown in those kind of orangey areas, allow for compact development of single-family homes on lots of less than an acre with less than 200 feet of frontage under current zoning. This in part, as I think most of us know, speaks to the fact that we just have a lot of limited areas of water and sewer throughout the state, which to some degree does limit how much density we can do on lots. But by the same token, there has definitely been, and as I think we'll hear about later in the presentation, and as we heard our keynote speaker, due in response to kind of a lot of development over the last several decades, there has been a shift towards larger lot zoning. So we're going to talk about some today, which has resulted in kind of some of these more suburban kind of like developments, Kind of what are their opportunities for kind of trying to re-legalize the zoning and kind of grow our kind of cherished town centers and village centers where historically.
Great, and you're going to mention at the end of our presentation some of the new legislation that's come about that might assist in that in the future. We haven't had a lot of experience with that yet, but we're looking forward to seeing how that's going to play out over the next 5-10 years or so. Great. So what tools do we already have that we can use to address some of these issues? And again, we pulled these out of our hat, and if you have some others, you can add to it. Certainly master plans, we're going to talk about that being the foundational document, visioning tool for communities to come up with their needs and their hopes for 5-10 years. Zoning we talked about. Preservation easements is a tool that Stratum has implemented. I don't think a lot of other communities have done that, so we're looking forward to hearing about that. Having local historic districts with some flexibility is great. Our 79D and E, which we've had for a little while, is starting to come to fruition. The housing legislation, certainly greater density, using the ADUs for either adding on to housing or the small house type, the converting historic buildings, which we have good experience with, and certainly collaborating across sectors. We're going to hear a bit about working with other town organizations and nonprofits to make things happen. Again, speaking to the talk today. So are there other tools that you guys have experienced that might be added to our list? Yes?
Something Noah and I were speaking about this morning was changes to the tax incremental financing law from a couple of years ago. He could speak to that better than I could.
And I did not mention the housing champions. Can you stand up and say a little bit about that? Because on my drive, I was thinking we should have included that in here. So I'll give you a pitch.
Okay, thank you. As of right now, there are 18 communities that are housing champions throughout the state. What that signifies is these are communities that have enacted change in their planning and zoning. They've had community dialogue about what type of development they'd like to see in their community, and then make sure that that aligns, their vision for that aligns with their ordinances and plans and what a developer might really experience. It also takes a look at, are they planning for their infrastructure improvements or maintenance? So it's really a stamp that says they've had the discussion about development before a developer first comes in the room, and it enables the community to really decide what they would like to see for development, balancing everything from cultural, historical assets to demands on community infrastructure. So there's 18 of those communities. There's another 10 more that are being announced shortly. We don't anticipate there's going to be a massive number of them because the bar is pretty high. Once a community is a housing champion, it enables them to access resources through the Housing Champion Fund to do infrastructure improvements or incentives for creating affordable housing in the community. So it's a great program. Unfortunately, it didn't get any additional funding, so we put all the money out. But we're creating non-monetary, at least non-direct monetary benefits, such as a project that has to go through a 106 review. DHR is a process where they do the request for public review, and the projects within a housing champion community get a rapid or prioritization. The Department of Transportation is also working with us to do prioritization on TAP grants, bridge aid, and a few other items to becoming one.
Thank you. So when do we hear the new communities? You'll have that on your website at BEA?
Yes, we sent out notification letters to them at this point. We don't have a big event planned yet like we did last time, but we're probably going to have one maybe at the beginning of next year. In the meantime, we're going to visit each community and present their awards to them.
Great. Thank you. So we'll talk a little bit first about, yes, please.
I'm sorry, I can't hear everything. I think zoning is part of this whole deal.
Yes.
Because here in Exeter, there's a variety of zoning, and we listen and look to see what's going down the road. There's a planning board that comes up with the zoning articles that citizens vote on. And sometimes we find it's a struggle after it's been done, so we may modify it the next year, so. And we do not like at all the legislature messing with local zoning, because it's not any of our business, my opinion. Thank
Well,
you.
it does go against what we heard earlier today of New Hampshire's, sort of community control and how important that is, because every community is different and have different needs. So when you try and do that blanket, you must do, it's difficult to make that work. Yes?
I think another thing that possibly could be mentioned is the demolition delay permit process.
Excellent. Yes.
I know that in Hooksett, where I chair the Heritage Commission, we have been getting many demolition delay permits for the town, and that's why I'm trying to, encourage preservation, because it's hard when these, Hooksett's positioned in between two large cities, right? And it's becoming more and more of a bedroom community, and we have been seeing lots and lots of demos of older buildings in our community. So I'd love to maybe hear from anyone in the room in their experience. I know it simply is just a delay, and I just don't know if there's anything that we can do to maybe reinforce that a little bit better. So that's another topic possibly.
But you've had some successes in the past.
Yes.
There's a stone house on Route 3
Yes,
a
yes.
few years ago, and it looks lovely now. So
Yes.
that's great.
Yeah.
Instead of a storage facility, which was going to be there, right?
Yes, yes, which Hooksett's known for our storage facilities.
Yes, Nate.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that demolition review is very important. As you noted, it's also, in New Hampshire, it's not too strong.
No, it's
Right.
not,
Right.
at all.
We-
Really.
Without a change in the state enabling legislation, we can't have a lot of teeth into it. We can't prevent a demolition. A lot of people think that just because a property is on the National Register or the State Register that it can't be demolished, and that's not true. So that is one reason why in Stratham we're really turning towards preservation easements, because whether they are donated or purchased, that's something that we can actually prohibit demolition. The other thing that we've worked on is creating a neighborhood heritage district, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. But that also gives us the ability to put a little more teeth into demolition restrictions, and it also allows us to incentivize keeping historic buildings while allowing more uses and additions or renovations or
Density.
yes, greater density in exchange for keeping a historic house or a historic building. So there are things that we are trying to do beyond the demolition review, but the demolition review is an important tool. We did, in Stratham, we did save a house just by meeting with the heirs that inherited the property and explaining to them why the house was important.
Good.
And
And it gives you a little time for publicity, and a lot of times buildings get demolished and people say, oh, if I'd only known,
Right,
sure.
Yes.
And in that case, in that particular case, I think this is an important lesson too. Their lot was big enough to subdivide, but it didn't have enough frontage without tearing down the house.
Yes.
So they wanted to tear down the house so they could subdivide and sell two lots. So we told the family that the Heritage Commission would go to the ZBA with them and advocate for a variance so that they could be relieved of the frontage requirement. And that's how we were able to save that house. So it's all interwoven, and
It is.
and Heritage Commissions need to recognize that while we don't have a lot of legal authority, we can be proactive and we can advocate with other town boards that do have legal authority.
And that's one tip to heritage commissions. You should make your presence known now with the ZBA. Don't wait until there's some crisis. Keep track of their agendas and, get the link established now.
Yes.
And also look toward having an opportunity to put members on zoning board, planning board,
Yes.
Yeah.
and so on, that you know are.
Or recruit from someone who's already on there who seems sympathetic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. And I'm looking forward to the Neighborhood Heritage District, and I'm not sure how long you've been with Hooksett, but Hooksett was one of the communities who had originally looked into establishing one, and there was that flutter, 18 years ago, and it took quite a while, but we're happy to have one. So maybe it's something you guys start to look into again, since you have kind of a baseline for it.
That's the main reason why I'm here, and I saw Stratum was here, so I'll be talking with you guys. Yeah.
So as I mentioned, we'll move to master plans and talking about how more recently there have been some that have utilized some different sorts of strategies to make it a little easier for communities to understand and implement them. So I'll pass that back off.
Great. So yes, I think this great conversation we've been having, a great segue into this topic of really how do we bring preservation kind of into the center of more of the planning process. I'm just going to highlight a couple of examples of master plans, but kind of the general kind of theme I want folks to kind of think about here is that in New Hampshire we only require the vision and land use section to be in the master plan. As folks on the planning side are well know, the statute lists out 15 or 17 other optional sections. But really the only things that are actually required are vision and land use. So we're seeing this kind of trend, which I'd encourage other communities to think about, Berlin being one of them. They're from trees to trails to thriving community, which kind of threw out the traditional master plan model saying we're going to have our section on historic and cultural resources, we're going to have our section
This much material.
We're going to have our section on natural resources, we're going to have our section on housing, we're going to have our section on community facilities, but none of those sections end up like really talking to each other about like how do you do the work together.
Exactly.
So the beauty of the Berlin master plan, which we'll talk about Manchester's master plan in a minute, is that it's instead centered around these 6 kind of core themes, including revitalizing downtown and adjacent neighborhoods, preserving what makes Berlin special, broadening the tax base through development and redevelopment. Steve's firm actually did the plan with the city of Berlin, but it's a great example. We're not going to go into kind of too much detail of kind of how you kind of rethink how you do your master plan to really put preservation, Berlin being a great example of this rich industrial history, is trying to celebrate its past while move forward. Steve, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I will.
To the Berlin
To
process.
your comment, the traditional chapter approach put everything in a silo. Nobody really liked that. If you're a history and heritage advocate, you ended up in one of those silos. So what we do now often is in existing conditions, we need all the data. We want to know where all the historic sites and structures are. We want to know where all the natural resources are, but that can go in an appendix. And then what do we do with it? And I think in our conversations and prepping for today, talking about how heritage commissions and others can get involved in master plan as you all get involved in stratums, you can bring the message forward and show how it connects out. So in Dover, they made connections between heritage sites and climate change and recreation, and showed how there are multiple reasons you may want to preserve something or invest in something. And that's one of the messages we want to bring across.
And I want to mention, because you mentioned acknowledging resources, and I'm going to throw out our tool, which is Emmett Plus at the Division of Historical Resources. And we've had Emmett since around 2019, and it is a GIS-based searchable tool to pull up all of the resources that have been determined eligible for the National Register, listed to the National Register, surveyed already over the last 40 some odd years. And it was a subscription plan that cost money, but we were fortunate to get some of the ARPA money from the federal government this last year, and in January we launched our enhanced system, and now it's free. And you can go in and sign up on our website, and you can search the whole state and pull up inventory forms and reports on historic buildings and et cetera. So I encourage you to look for that, especially if you're working with your town and wanting to know what in my town is already listed on the register, what does DHR consider a significant site, at the state register, that sort of thing. So encourage that. Yes?
Again, don't want to brag, I want to
Please.
suggest everybody goes online to Exeter, New Hampshire, and look at our master plan. It's that thick.
Yep.
And it's interesting, I've also sat on the alumni board at Keene State. They were going through the process of what they're going to do. We're going through the process of master plan. There is something like, on the end, each one comes to who's going to do it, who's in charge, what the results is. And I'll tell you, our report now All those items have been dealt with, maybe not completed, but that master plan has been the strongest tool, most successful throughout the books. Let's get somebody that can read, it's online, a citizen can look at it and say, oh, I'm interested in that, it's good to know. And we speak more in the planning board about the master plan. So, yeah, I think it's a great example, and Keene State is the same, picking them out.
Stratham is a smaller town than
Yes.
Exeter, and we adopted the same kind of pattern. And one of the things that I've noticed in living with that plan for a few years is that when new hires come to work for the town,
Exactly.
they have that with them and can look at it. They can even decide, oh, I don't want to work for that place, or hey, this is really something I could
Yep.
get my teeth into.
It's a
It
much
makes for
stronger
much
base, yeah.
smoother transitions between, planning departments or, even a town manager or whatever, really helps.
I will echo Exeter's transparency and how nice the website is for the town, and that, they are a certified local government, which is a program through our office for the Historic District Commission in the town to get some grants and technical assistance and did design plans for the historic district. And having that all online is just so helpful. If you're looking for another example in a community, you can see how successful that community was. So the more you can get that message online, the more robust it is, that's great.
Plus, you've got your regional planning commissions as a great resource, and I hope you all met towns and all the members of your planning commission. Great resource. Do all the mapping, do all the numbers, you still have the information. But you can read it.
We just worked with Rockingham Planning Commission to do an interactive map of all of our historic resources in the town. And we're still adding some pictures and fine tuning it, so it hasn't been publicized yet, but it is live on the Heritage Commission's page. If you go to strathamhampshire.gov. And we think that will be a really helpful tool for broadening public awareness of how many places are special.
And we have, as many of you do, a lot of newcomers to towns.
Yes.
And it's very handy to have them be able to look at a map like that, but also at a master plan. I know when I moved to Stratham in 2001, it's like trying to find out what the heck is going on there was really hard. And they were surprised to discover that I actually went back and looked at old town reports and saw there was a Heritage Commission. I said, what are they doing?
So you mentioned that Manchester did a master plan recently too that had some good suggestions.
Yeah, so Manchester, we're now, 4 years out, I think, since their master plan, but it was really centered on this, again, kind of throughout that traditional model, and it's really centered around this kind of growth and conservation framework. Again, thinking back to kind of the keynote speaker that we heard earlier, kind of our built environment and the areas we want to conserve don't always have to be at loggerheads with each other. I can't reinforce that theme enough today. So they kind of really focused on what are the areas that we really want to, what are the lands we really want to conserve, and where are the areas that we really want to, that have the potential for more infill development. It's not quite a surprise that kind of the areas, and get the coloring wrong here, but kind of the darker blue areas, are the areas I believe that they want to talk about kind of doing more development are the kind of more original kind of middle part of Manchester downtown, along Merrimack, where there are opportunities for adaptive reuse, for infill, and so right now Manchester is actually in the kind of 20-yard line, getting close to the finish line of rezoning the entire city based on this master plan, and a lot of community, hundreds of hours of community engagement to kind of bring that to life. And where are there opportunities for infill to add some more density to address this housing shortage we have? But where are also the right areas where they can also strengthen conservation as well, where that makes sense.
And I would think in Manchester, Manchester, there's certain neighborhoods that have a lot of carriage houses and other underutilized outbuildings. That would be an excellent example of the accessory dwelling unit.
That's a really great point. So the new, I think most folks are probably familiar that the New Hampshire's ADU statute, which had been on the books since 2017, was amended and updated, and the new version, among other things, now allows for the adaptive reuse of existing structures on properties into detached accessory dwelling units, even if they would otherwise may not meet the lot coverage or setback standards of the municipality zoning ordinance.
Yep.
And, you know, we won't, and I think that there's been a lot of spirited debate on, you know, whether this changes were needed or not. We won't get into that. But I guess the one point I would make, which I think you're making very well, is that a lot of our historic structures predate when zoning was initially established. And so doing anything with them, you know, maybe they're not conforming, but doing anything that would be considered a substantial, you know, change which could increase that nonconformity is a very, very long process, going to get a variance before your ZBA, before your zoning board. And so this is one more way to kind of hopefully reutilize and bring back to life some of these kind of historic carriage houses and other barns.
So speaking of barns, we've transitioned to our 79D, the New Hampshire Barn Tax Incentive Program, which Stratham has, and I'm sure many other communities do, so you're probably familiar with it, but if you could explain some of your successes through that program.
So this again brings me back to the keynote speaker, where you undertake small steps, and cumulatively it adds up to something very significant. And the Barn Tax Incentive Program was established by state law in late 90s. And there is a state committee that oversees it, of which I'm a part, and Jada over here is also a part. And so property owners can enroll voluntarily with their local select board or city council. And it's not a permanent easement, it's a term easement, so it's 10 years.
10 years.
And they get a tax break on their property tax bill in exchange for saying, we're going to maintain this barn, we're not going to tear it down. If the roof needs to be replaced, we're going to replace it. If it needs painting, we're going to paint it. So there's a promise between the property owner and the municipalities that those historic agricultural structures will be maintained in the landscape. Adaptive reuse is allowed. This barn on the left, many of you know locally, sits in the center of the Stratham traffic circle, and it is a commercial business. It's an antique business, so it's enrolled in the program, even though it's not being used to store hay or house animals. This is an 18th century barn on the Doug and Stella Scanlon farm,
Yep.
also on Portsmouth Avenue.
Restored, by the way.
Restored, beautifully restored. And some of you know that the larger dairy barn that stood next to it burned a number of years ago. And this was saved by the skin of its teeth thanks to the fire department.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a valuable tool. We have, I think, about 24 barns enrolled in Stratham. We're one of the most in the state, along with some others over on the Lakes region too. And it's another tool.
I would just add that, you know, if you're a small heritage commission, this can be a good calling card to introduce yourself to an owner of an older property with a barn. And also you perceive as being more active in the town, and it kind of opens up doors for you. It's a little bit of work, but it also alerts the town, you know, the select board and so forth, that this is here, and we're here, and we're doing things.
And everyone loves to talk about their barn, so I'm sure it's an easy thing to initiate conversation.
And you know, a lot of people are worried about their barns, and worrying about how they're going to save them, and, you know,
And some people are very private about allowing strangers into their home, but they're happy to show their barn. So it's a good way to start a dialogue with people, because a lot of times these barns also have a historic house sitting next to them or attached to them.
So a comment in the back.
Yeah.
I just had a question.
Oh, sure.
So my understanding of the barn tax incentive program is that the municipality has to decide, does
Yeah, and if you're a town meeting form of government, your town meeting has to adopt it, and as a community. So if you're a Heritage Commission member in a town that has not adopted it, that's a good goal for you to achieve, yes, would be to adopt it.
But it can be anywhere in town. There's not a geographical location.
Correct.
The next section, we're going to talk about 79E, which is the companion, so to speak, legislation.
So,
Yes.
I don't believe that D has to be adopted at town meeting, it's E that needs to be adopted. D is out there, you can just, yeah, I'm sure of that, actually.
I don't know.
Well, we can get that information back and hopefully maybe give it to the Alliance and kind of have that information on the follow-up.
I know
It's
he,
not a question.
I've heard what you're saying too, but I'm not an expert on it. We don't really manage that program.
If you
at all.
need a heritage one for that, it comes complicated, but what we're talking about, D does not need to be adopted by the town, E does, for sure.
he definitely does, for sure.
Definitely.
Can you explain the differences about E?
So,
What that does?
and I'm not an expert on E, but I'm here because we have a success story at Stratum that E was absolutely essential. And that is our old town hall, which came this close to the wrecking ball. And we were able to, after many conversations with the developer, convince him to save it. It was converted to residential use.
We had to lose another structure next door, but, which still hurts, but sometimes you have to make these trade-offs.
But at any rate, the developer will tell anybody who asks him today that he is thrilled that he listened to us because he gets more compliments on this building than anything else he's
No,
ever
I'm
built.
sure.
And also that it gave him a lot of goodwill in the community. And, but he'll also tell you that if it weren't for 79E, he wouldn't have done it. That those tax incentives were critical to the economics of making it work.
Yes, yeah.
So it is an extremely valuable tool for any town, big or small.
And do you
And there are
promote this
restrictions
in
on-
your- Do you promote this in your as a part of the Heritage Commission to get the message out that it's available? Or does the town promote that in Strata?
In Stratum, it's primarily the Heritage Commission that is working with property owners, and that if there's a potential project, we'll bring it to the select board to talk about.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, yes.
I just looked up the statute,
Thank you.
79D.
Yes, D.
Does not have to be adopted by the town meeting. 79E does.
Perfect.
But I think on 79D, heritage commissions can, since the selectman or governing body makes these decisions when a property owner applies, heritage commissions can help educate the selectmen
Yes.
and counselors about the value of approving these applications.
Thank you for looking that up.
Thank you for the clarification, and you're absolutely right. Some select boards are more supportive than others. And heritage commissions are vital links working with property owners. The select board's not gonna go out and solicit these. They've got too many other irons in the fire,
Yeah.
and they're giving up a little tax revenue. So it's up to us to recruit landowners that want to
And
participate.
we did do a little bit of a publicity campaign, I think we got into the Exeter newsletter and some others, that this was threatened. So the word got out, and I think it helped. The guy wasn't being able to do this, in the middle of the night. The spotlight was on him.
And so we have a more traditional sort of form of the 79E, where this accompanies oftentimes federal tax credit program funding or ability to get money for that, or other funding like low-income housing. And I think, Noah, you had an example at China Mill in Allenstown.
Yes, and I just want to first take a step back, and so for anybody that's not familiar kind of with 79E, if that's okay,
Please.
kind of the nuts and bolts. So big picture, generally starts at 5 years. Well, first I'll take a step back. As we said about the adoption process, the legislative body has to adopt the use of 79E, then the governing body goes ahead and sets the boundaries of the 79E district, And then they also set how long that tax relief is going to be. So the general principle is, if you have a building that has at least, you're going to do rehab of at least 15% of the assessed value, or at least $75,000 of improvements, then they'll become eligible for 79E relief. In short, what that would mean is that the town would, assessing department would freeze the assessed value, and in doing so, the property taxes for a set number of years. 5 years to start with, it's just kind of base 79E. You can then add another 4 years. This is all at the discretion of the governing body of this valley. Add another 4 years if you want, if the property is on the National Register. And then a provision added a few years ago, add another 4 years if there's an affordable housing component as well. So total potential of 13 years of kind of the developer, the property owner, isn't having to worry about a significant increase in their property taxes due to all the improvements ongoing. I'm not going to get into the details kind of today, but the statute's also been, so historic, traditionally 79E was just created for just use in downtowns, town centers, village centers, wherever there's kind of historic patterns of development. The legislator, the last kind of several years, has expanded it for other uses. So there's now the ability to use 79E for new construction of housing outside of downtown and town centers. I bring this up less for the more as a cautionary tale. It's only been on the books a couple of years, but I'm not going to name the town, but there is a town that has tried to utilize this, and it literally requires demolishing a qualified structure, potentially historic structure, in housing opportunity zones in order for a developer or the property owner to become eligible for the tax 79E tax relief for new construction. Don't do that, basically. I'm still not quite sure why that happened the way it is. There is also opportunities kind of still to be seen of additional opportunities using 79E now for underutilized office space, commercial, industrial space in existing structures for adaptive reuse in housing. This example here, the China Mill in Allenstown, is a great example of a historic mill along the Suncook River from 1868. The town of Allenstown had developed an infill development overlay district that really prioritized both, again, these themes of historic preservation, bringing back some of the kind of underutilized structures in this mill town, as well as adding new housing but reflecting existing character. And so this mill, which had sat underutilized, vacant for years, was converted into 150 market rate apartments in 2023. And I think the thing here interesting is that they were able to basically tie the zoning and the 79E together. So 79E, the borders of 79E district match the boundaries of the overlay district where this potential for the adaptive reuse of the housing was possible.
I'm going to call out Brandy. Brandy, was this a federal preservation tax incentive program? She runs that program, which is tax credits at the federal level.
Yes, so this project was, they did participate in that program. And for those who aren't familiar, I'll just do a quick, it's for income producing properties. So business, office, industrial use, housing, rental housing, not, private housing, if it's your own home. And you can get 20% of the qualified expenditures, so the amount that you spend on the rehabilitation of the structure as a credit right off of your taxes owed. It is a process. It does involve review through our office and the National Park Service, but we have quite a few projects in the state, including Allen's Mill, China Mill. And mills are a frequent flyer type of the program. But we also have a lot of downtown buildings that we've seen, mixed use, commercial and housing, that kind of thing as well.
Thank you.
Just a word of caution. The Ioka Theater, if you're in town, is under that program. And I'm not sure the number of years, but the short and long is, the developer is got the approval based on his purchase of the building. It was an interesting project. They took everything out of the shell, and everything had to go through the front door because the river's on the backside. They built a superstructure in there and had put 6 condominiums above, First floor is shops. One is filled, the waiting to toilets, and the bottom floor is supposed to be speakeasy that has, you step out actually over the river. That's still yet to be filled. However, those 6 units have sold for more than $1 million each, and those people are still paying the small taxes until the time finally runs out. So the town voted down to stop the program, although we do have another building that's going up on it. So watch your timing on it. Yes, exactly. Because you could really be losing a lot of money in the long run. Yeah.
That's an interesting challenge, though, because I know that that property had sat for so long, and there was a lot of controversy, so I can see why they might utilize that at the time to garner interest in the property, but when you look back on it, you see some negatives.
So it's still original outside, they have the old Ioka sign on it, the way it was originally, so it did it very nicely, yeah.
So I was one of the founding partners of Market Square Architects. I recently started my own office, Red Fox Architects, which is probably appropriate today since I'm the fox in the hen house at this event. But I see all of this stuff from the other side, from the development side and the dollar side. And so our office, I wasn't heavily involved in the Ioka project, but our office was. And I will tell you, my wife grew up in Exeter. I've lived in Stroud for 20 years. We used to go to that theater.
Yes.
That theater had lost its reason for being. The reason is because we don't have pedestrians in downtown. Not enough. And if you create zoning and master planning in your downtown to enable pedestrians, these buildings don't need any of these incentives. They're expensive to maintain, they're expensive to repair, they're really challenging if you're trying to change the use from something that's lost its meaning. The pro formas don't ever make sense. The Ioka building, internally, the structural system was not something that would, that building would probably be gone without this.
Yes.
And so, it's a time period of 5 years. Are you using the dollar value in that time period? Yes, but you're giving predictability to the developer to make their pro forma work.
Yeah.
And so that's the trade-off. So I wouldn't say it's lost value. The value is you've kept a building that otherwise nobody would have done. Steve and I worked in Rochester, and a lot of it was the same thing. You couldn't give those buildings away in their downtown because you're requiring people to build vacant first-floor commercial space that they've lost the value. And so if you get enough pedestrians, it works. But one of the things I would say in a lot of these programs we're talking about, including the building in Stroud that we saved, which is great, if there was enough activity and enough infrastructure in that area of downtown Stroud, you wouldn't have needed to convince the owner, and you probably wouldn't have lost that other building. But we fight as communities, and I know because I have those conversations everywhere in the state, we fight doing that because of property taxes. And so it is that balance. And what I would say to everybody, if you have buildings that are important in downtown infrastructure and you're looking to save them, invite your development community to the table to say, what would enable you to make this economically viable in a pro forma? They'll tell you, hey, give us 79E, we can do it. But they'll give you the answers to that equation.
Thank you. I'd like to hear the other side. I think everyone does. Another question?
Yeah, so I'm hesitating a little bit because I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't have a lot of experience with this, but our town has had a handful of 79E applications. They tend to come in a little bit after the fact when the developer realizes sort of as they're into their project that this is an option. So it's not necessarily a site that isn't going to be picked up on. One of the concerns that I've had just sitting back and watching it from a little bit of a purist perspective is the work that's being done consistent with the originality of the building and what needs to be done there. So we have an example downtown that recently was redone. I think it's a viable building. They've made some changes, but like some of the other properties that I've seen recently, they've got vinyl windows and putting these other things in. It's a little bit different because I think the objective of that incentive is to get the building used, but what can you dovetail with that to make sure that it is being done in a way that is as consistent with the buildings around it and the preservation aspect as possible?
Can I speak to that in terms of the old town hall in Stroud? We made some compromises there, consciously. We did require preservation easement on the exterior. We allowed the interior to do whatever they wanted. And on the exterior, we went back and forth on original materials. Becky next to me is a real purist. God bless her. But we also knew that we couldn't have everything. And so we allowed hardy plank siding, but not vinyl siding. We allowed reproduction moldings and trim work, but we kept some of the originals.
Can I ask though, is this in a historic district? Because we don't have the district.
We don't have a historic district.
But the moldings, we actually found a guy who makes replicas from the originals. And we also worked with him on color. And, you know, he first was not kicked and screamed, but he was grateful, you know.
Yeah, so we did, it was a cooperative effort between us and the developer in terms of picking architectural details, allowing the use of modern materials, but staying true to the architectural form and protecting it permanently.
Do you mind?
Please go.
At what point does that conversation happen though? Because I think there's only 3 examples I've seen in town. There really hasn't been an opportunity for that conversation. It's, you know, the development, is, like I said, started. They realize they can apply for it. They apply for it. Construction's already underway. There's really no back and forth about what's being done. And to be clear, the board has said moving forward, these applications have to come in early. I'm just wondering how you get those conversations at least to be part of it before.
In our case, it was demolition review. That's when that dialogue started. And it was organic from there. But that was the first meeting with the developer he's pulling a demolition permit.
And this is another example too of where the local community has the decision-making power in that legislation. So the Division of Historical Resources is really only written in if there is a non-ability in the town to determine whether the building is considered historic, a local, significant property. So if you have a Heritage Commission, they usually act hopefully on that decision-making. And as you mentioned, if you can get involved and get the town folks to get knowledge to you early, so that even if you're not in the local district, you're providing that advisory assistance. And we utilize the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, and certainly that might be too strict for many communities, but it's still great guidance, and there's a lot of flexibility, so that having everyone knowledgeable about that guidance would be helpful.
I think one of the things we realized is that there needs to be that inventory. There was originally an earlier conversation about inventory. And so if community development, who are the ones getting the demolition requests, aren't even familiar with which ones are. So we're kind of starting from not having that list and that reference point, which then means those conversations don't happen.
Make sure you look at our Emmett Plus to make sure we don't have something already.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, because I think if you identify the locations in your town that are valuable for specific reasons, or at least maybe the top third, most building owners will be happy to have that conversation even before a demolition, right? Because that's not the ideal kind of time to have that conversation. But all of you are great resources in terms of, they'll be happy to keep original moldings. They don't know where to get them. They want to push the easy button. But if you can provide them the easy button, or if you say, hey, what are your long-term plans for this building? This is something that's really important to our Heritage Commission to save long-term. How can we help you achieve your goals for the property economically? You become a resource, you become the easy button. And so that's the dialogue that I think, when we've had that on the developer side, that's really, really valuable. When you get to the other side, where you're trying to do something and now it's prevented, that's where it becomes abrasive.
I love that.
We've had some successes and some struggles trying to do those things. We have some other examples in town where there's demolition by neglect happening, and we've tried to engage property owners, and it's been unsuccessful. So there's no magic bullet, but yes, we do make those efforts, and we do a lot of legwork. That old town hall redevelopment, we did a bunch of legwork to make it easier for him, and so we got a product that we were comfortable with.
So now we come to how do we use these tools to protect open space and revive historic properties and keep our landscapes while allowing new construction and added density, because we cannot just keep the state as is or a particular building as is. We have to grow, but we have to make sure it sort of maintains that uniqueness, I say, of New Hampshire. So we've got the Stratford County Courthouse in Dover that Noah was going to speak to.
Great, awesome. Thank you. So this is actually also another example of the 79E again, but this is the old Stratford County Courthouse in Dover, which became obsolete several years ago after Stratford County opened their new courthouse. Building was built in 1889, and just last year it opened, was redeveloped into 59 apartments. But what's really notable here is that, it's by Schimberg Companies, is that they did the original part of the building, the courthouse, and the front images there, were converted into 12 units. But then the zoning allowed for adding a 4-story addition which matches the roof line and more or less, not quite, but pretty much the envelope, surrounding envelope of the courthouse. We're able to add in an additional, sorry, I'm looking at my numbers here, an additional 48 units in that rear addition. So simultaneously, we're able to preserve the courthouse. We're also able to keep 12 of the units are affordable at 80% of area median income for, I think, 21 years. But they're also able to add some density and more housing here as well.
I'm not familiar with this particular project, but I kind of like just glancing at the addition in that it's a little simplified at the base, and so it doesn't match the historic original courthouse, but it does still retain elements and it blends in. So those are key tools for the guidelines.
This is another project that so Carrie Cottage, this one, I looked at this project for, I don't know, half dozen developers before Eric bought it, and most of those developers was before the zoning allowed the addition, the bath, and the density. And everybody wanted to turn it into housing because that was the value of the cost per square foot return. And I can tell you that that building was originally a courthouse, and if you wanted to renovate it as a courthouse, that would make a lot of sense. But if you wanted to renovate it for housing, it made absolutely no sense at all. No one would have ever done it, you would have lost that building. If it wasn't for the allowability of the zoning to add on the additional building, and again, this is the trade-offs that you're talking about. Can you accept the density that you need to have in the other building to pay for the costs that don't make any sense to convert the residential units in a courthouse building on the other side? And then you save that building.
So here we talk about the easements and how these have been helpful for Stratum, and as I mentioned, I don't see these utilized very often.
Yeah, are we on the cutting edge? Well, first of all, we want to credit the Preservation Alliance because they were critical partners in both of these two buildings. And that's sort of what got us started. And since then, we've taken it further. The top one is the Samuel Lane Homestead in the middle of the traffic circle, and the bottom one is the Bartlett Cushman House on Portsmouth Avenue. And both were threatened with demolition and redevelopment. Both are in essentially commercially zoned areas. Technically, the Bartlett Cushman House is residential ag, but it's on a very busy commercial street.
Residential professional.
Professional, yeah. And so the bottom one, the town actually voted to buy it, to save it.
Well, it's adjacent to.
It's adjacent to the town offices. So there was some synergy there. And we put a preservation easement on it with the Preservation Alliance. And then subdivided off the acre of land in the back that is contiguous with the town offices and resold the house in the front, which has now been beautifully restored by a new private owner. But that
As a residence.
as a residential, yeah.
But it's another sidelight is this was going to be bought and probably turned into a gas station, because it's on a corner.
Oh, no,
And
that's-
it was at that same town meeting that we got our first demolition review ordinance passed in town. So it sort of came with a little bonus, and then that slowed the process down. And we began to, discuss with the town what should happen, and went through a lot of gyrations. It took a number of years.
Well, a good example of partnering with another organization like the Alliance, I mean, a Heritage Commission can hold an easement, but it might be a lot of responsibility monitoring and all the work you need to do. But the Alliance has a program for quite some time, and they do that, so that's a great synergy there.
And it's a pretty high bar, but justifiably, the Preservation Alliance has a pretty high bar for easements they'll accept, and that's important to remember. The upper one was listed the 7th to save, I forget the year. And we got it on New Hampshire Chronicle, it was on TV, just brought a lot of public awareness to the importance of that site, and was, again, a Preservation Alliance easement that came to the rescue, that was funded by an LCHIP grant with matching town money.
It took a little persuasion, actually.
Yeah.
For LCHIP, the sort of non-historic preservation part of LCHIP was dragging their heels until we dragged them over there. And could see what it was all about.
It's an interesting concept for a town to become, so involved in real estate. You've got to convince people, here's the plan.
Well, it gets better.
And they're going to listen. Sure, things happen along the way, and who knows what they talk about in the coffee shops, but
Yeah.
we're not in the real estate business. Well, you are going to be, but trust us, it's going to work. Give us 10 years or something. And here, you have 2 great examples.
I think
Yeah,
there's a number of factors at play.
yeah.
One is that we're fortunate to live in one of the more affluent communities in the state, let's be honest. Not every town is in the position to do something like
Yes,
this.
that's right.
Another is that Stratham Hill Park, for those of you who aren't familiar,
You should be.
was a gift to the town, Edward Tuck, and in 1906, and
Also donated this
Another
building.
top.
donated this building also that we're sitting in. And so the town has a long history of stewarding public resource, real estate, shall we say.
Yeah.
In 1985, the town voted to purchase the farm that's behind Stratham Hill Park to expand the open space and to have room to build a new elementary school in the back. So that, and that farm has a historic house and barn on it. So the town has been maintaining those buildings and renting them to tenants for all this time. So there's that door was cracked open
Yes.
already.
Yeah.
So it is a tough hill to climb, and this is not an easy thing to convince people of. It is not. Now, this one, oops, yeah, you can move to the next slide.
I was going to say, being proactive and revolutionary.
So this one, so now we're getting smarter.
Learn wiser.
This is a new subdivision, which I hate to see, because I hate to lose any farm, right? But it's gonna happen. The ship has sailed. So this is important for 2 reasons. One is, as part of the planning board approval of this, we advocated for a preservation easement on this and that. Free.
Sure.
It's permanent.
That's part of the planning process.
Part of the planning
Negotiate
process.
that out, yes.
Right.
Been there, done that.
But if we hadn't had the experience of Bartlett Cushman House and Lane Homestead, this wouldn't have crossed our minds. So now I would advocate any town where there's a development that involves a historic building, make this a requirement of your approval. The other thing that's nice about this project, I hate to say nice as a farmer because it's still hurts me, but down here, you'll notice there are clusters of smaller buildings. And here we've been talking about density today.
Yeah.
And Stratham has 2 acre zoning, which I voted against. We used to have 1 acre zoning. There was a push 20 years ago to make it 2 acre zoning, and it passed. But this developer, just because he chose to, not because anybody made him, came in with this plan to put, these are 2-bedroom homes. So they're small.
Okay.
And they're in clusters of 4 on a lot.
All right.
So this isn't doable in traditional zoning. Our town doesn't show up in orange on that original map that showed where you can do denser residential. But this is happening. And so it's 4 houses on a single lot. They share a common septic. And so it's a way to get a little more density and more smaller scale homes, a little bit more. They're not going to be affordable, God help us. But they'll be more affordable than the 4-bedroom homes that are up here.
And they might bring in some diverse, different types of people who are looking for those, either older or younger. Or
Older and younger, and somewhat more affordable.
We've done Exeter Farms, cluster development, put your houses close together. The balance of the land is conserved land, which belongs to the homeowners. So it's a nice balance, I think, it's a kind of a
Yes.
which is similar to this idea.
Yeah, this
Keep
whole
the
thing
houses
is,
together
yeah,
and keep the land available. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
happened in Stratham. We bought in 2001, moving to Stratham, we bought an 18th century house that originally had something like 40 acres as part of the property, and that had long ago been, that acreage had been dropped off and bought up by a nearby dairy farmer. Well, along came a developer right about the time we bought it, and so he was allowed to do clustered housing, and the strange benefit is we looked out onto our former acreage, because that was less open land, and there are public trails through it. So, yeah, you do have to give in to some of these changes, and I'm very excited about the smaller housing going in on that land.
So we talked a little bit earlier about myths in historic preservation and how they may or may not impact issues going on. I've put in the Penn Station here in the sense that Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act came in 1966, and it does not stop projects, but again, if there's a lot of public outcry and participation, we have seen projects stop primarily because of the public's interest. We lost this, but that spurred much of the preservation movement that we have today. In our demolition review, like you mentioned, if you're in a historic district that's National Register eligible or listed, people think that I can't do anything with my house, which is not true unless you're in a locally regulated historic district. And many of in our community, in our state, do not regulate paint color. There are a few, but most don't. So we'll are there other myths that you guys have kind of heard in your community that are like, oh my gosh, that's crazy?
Can I speak to 106 for a minute?
Yes.
Is anybody in the room who's not terribly familiar with 106 review? It can be a valuable tool. On the farm that I own with my family, we were going to be negatively impacted by a cell tower proposal, which was in the neighboring town across the river. And we engaged the Division of Historical Resources and the town's Heritage Commission before I was ever on it. And we were able to work with the town of Newfields and the cell tower developer to do a monopole style instead of the array where all the antennas are hanging off the side. So it visually minimized the effect. That was only possible because our farm is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. So this goes back to doing your inventories and working towards getting more properties listed or determined eligible for listing on the state and national register. It's really an important step.
Well, it's also a great public relations step, because one of the things that heritage commissions need to do is get your profile out there, seem to be doing things, caring, and so forth. Because when I arrived in Stratham, I noticed there was a heritage commission, and I said, "What are they doing?" It turned out not much. And But they didn't know how to begin. And so a lot of it is publicity, and this is where I lament the demise of small town newspapers, because we're really losing assets there. But you can use other kinds of media to do that. And I mean, literally set up a table at town meeting if you have one. Show up at election day, just stuff like that. You know, it's amazing how it helps.
I'm glad you mentioned the cell tower, because that does harken back to the concern about environmental laws being weakened. And so there is an executive order for all federal agencies to look at all of their laws and to not utilize laws that are not, following certain policy, and Section 106 and environmental NEPA laws are part of it. And the FCC is interested in having no more Section 106 for any of their cell towers. Even though we've had an agreement with the FCC for many years that streamlines the review, and it makes it very easy for them to erect their towers most of the time, there's no problem. And then when there is, we have a good communication. So it's very concerning for me and us, and it's not well known to the folks out there that this is happening. So keep an eye out for that.
Once that application is made, that's going to go through because you're on federal communications. However, there's a lot of negotiating space. We had one we dealt with, and they came with all kinds of different ideas to help the immediate neighbors become more comfortable with it. And so what stands there today is really what they didn't want, but they're comfortable with. They looked about the tree kind of design, this design, and bring it down a little bit, fly the balloon again, and it took a while to talk and work that one out. But the planning board was helpful in that process because go to court, you're not going to win this stuff. You spend enough money in court anyway.
Right.
So let's not have that one anymore.
So speaking of National Register, that program, and you guys have had some listings recently that you've worked with our office, and
Yeah, again, I guess I got ahead of myself by a slide, but yes, the Scanlon Farm on Portsmouth Avenue and the Scanlon ON Farm on River Road were both listed in recent years. This one, the River Road project is actually a National Historic District. It's actually 4 different properties that were all part of one farm originally. And so it's 3 residences, several barns, and then a large piece of open space that's owned by the Forest Society and the Scanlon Family Cemetery parcel. So that's our first historic district in
Not typical at all.
Yes.
This being one whole property.
so Megan Ruffnick is our National Register Coordinator, so if you have any questions, and our State Register Coordinator, see her after. So we have all of this information, and how are we going to implement what we want to do? We've talked about a lot of these: master plan, questionnaires, getting the priorities out there, public meetings, community input, enabling legislation, updates, zoning provisions, and creative initiatives. So I think we're going to kind of close on a couple of examples of new zoning that's out there, and you're seeing some new projects maybe getting started, and we'll see how successful they are.
Great. Before we get to that, I'm going to bring Steve into the conversation. Do you have anything to say on the kind of implementation?
No, I'll wait till the next one.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Great. So back to our favorite topic earlier of this fine line between what the legislator has decided to require of cities and towns, and what cities and towns have the choose to do with their zoning. This says, there's a picture here of Warner's kind of Main Street in Village Center, but this could really be any village center or any Main Street in New Hampshire. Were a lot of changes that were discussed, and some made it to the finish line in the legislature last year. One of them is a bill that's going to require, as of July of next year, that multifamily uses be allowed in commercial zoning districts. On its surface, sounds very scary, I think, for some communities to kind of even contemplate. Clearly is kind of some shifting of that balance of where's the state taking control, where's the municipality kind of deciding what it wants in its zone. But what I want to kind of highlight here is a couple of things about the bill. First, or about this new legislation. First, again, back to the earlier discussion we had a little bit on kind of reusing those underutilized kind of historic carriage houses that have become into disrepair. This bill is going to allow adaptive reuse, again, of underutilized structures in commercial districts, so in a lot of our town centers, village districts, that maybe, again, to the earlier point, just on paper, we're not ever going to pro forma out to ever kind of bring back to life, but for some zoning relief and able to convert into some level of housing. It could be 5 units, it could be 8 units. It does not have to be, these kind of, we're not talking 20, 30, 50 units of housing necessarily. It could be kind of little projects. So that's kind of one area. And, where it makes sense, municipalities can still, if they want to require first floor retail or commercial use, they can keep doing that. The other kind of interesting part of this opportunity before we turn it back, no, that's okay, is kind of the opportunity for infill development. While the legislation is going to kind of require multifamily to be allowed, whether that's, you define that as based on 5 units or 3+ units, the municipality can still, planning board can still kind of apply architectural design standards, can still decide, kind of put a cap on the number of units in the building, can still apply setback on the dimensional requirements, still subject that project to site plan review. So there's a lot of ways, I think, potentially add housing, as we've talked a lot about housing, and where do we add density as appropriate, to kind of match some of the historic development patterns that are had in our town centers, village centers, while also still respecting the character of our communities.
So, you'd like to speak to this?
Yeah, and so to that point, we wanted to talk a little bit about form-based code, and we're featuring a northern community, Lancaster. We, through the HOP program last year, were able to go back and work with them, understanding their housing needs, their housing challenges, the housing supply that they have. And in 2008, I think it was, I helped them with this form-based code. So it was one of the early form-based codes, right around the same time as Dover's. It's been in existence for a long time, and the reason it came to be was the residents and the planning board in Lancaster realized that their zoning would not allow them to recreate their downtown. The same story we hear all over New Hampshire. The downtown pattern, which they love, predated zoning. The zoning required 2 acres and other silly things. Their planner at one point even threatened to buy an empty lot and put a trailer on it just to fence it and tell everyone they'd stay out. But the noise building, the blue building that was mentioned this morning in the beginning session, that project was done by Garland Mill, and when we were working with the town through the HOP grant, we were able to interview people, talk with folks that were both challenged to meet their housing needs, and also, to Rob's point, we were able to talk to the very few people who actually do development in this very small community. And what we learned was that if they could have more density, they can make it work. And so it was a small change, but they went from 4 units per 10,000 square feet up to 6. And made another project happen in the old newspaper building behind this block. And so the form-based code also, some of the things that are in this, no minimum lot size. Meredith's just now thinking about that. We're working on a community plan in the town of Meredith, and we're saying, what if you get rid of your existing minimum lot size? And oh, by the way, your residential setbacks are the same in the village as they are in your most rural zone, 30 feet.
Okay.
Is that why your ZBA is so busy? And so I think starting to look at it, talk with the development community, a lot of the folks that are developing within our communities want to be successful and they want to be liked in the community. So they need to make the pro forma work, but they don't want to have all their projects, fought. And they want to understand what is the pattern, what is the character, what does the master plan say. So this is just another tool in there. Stratum has a form-based code as well. There are a few around the state to look at.
They want to leave a good footprint in town.
Yeah.
And
Those are the people you like to work with because they want to get something there and they want to do it right.
Right. Correct.
questions and answers, so this was perfect timing. And I know you kind of asked questions throughout, so we might not even have any. We can just stay a few more minutes and chat with people, yes?
Yeah, so we didn't touch upon the neighborhood heritage district.
Oh, gosh.
So I would really love to hear about that, and I will
Thank
talk
you.
with you guys at lunch, hopefully, about that more, because I have a lot of questions. So, but if you could just touch briefly in whatever time we have.
Do you want to start? No? Okay. So,
I guess let me
We-
start here.
our-
What my first question is, how difficult was it for you?
it was not difficult,
No.
okay? The community voted for it the first time that we put it on the warrant. What was difficult was figuring out, you're from Hooksett, so you're probably not familiar, but for those of you from local, this is the stretch of Portsmouth Avenue from the Stratham traffic circle out to the Greenland town line. So
Yeah.
it's the historic road between Portsmouth and Exeter. It's one of the oldest roads in the state and has a lot of 18th and 19th century homes on it, but also a lot of traffic. It served for a long time as Route 101. So big wide road, high speed, a lot of traffic. And a lot of the buildings were starting to deteriorate, and especially the houses. And so there was a lot of concern in the community. The property owners were saying, well, nobody wants to buy these as houses because of the traffic. But the town didn't want to see that stretch of road become looking like a commercial strip as the southern part of the street does going towards Exeter.
No car dealerships.
Car dealerships. So,
And we have no municipal water.
and we have no water and sewer in Stratham. So there were a couple of attempts a number of years ago to rezone that stretch of road, and they both failed in flames because people were so worried about commercial development. So the Heritage Commission kind of worked with the planning board. We had a joint meeting or two. It was part of our master planning process.
Well, I should also
Yeah.
add that the Preservation Alliance had created this concept of a neighborhood heritage district and had written a sort of profile of what that would be like, so that you had access to that.
Yes, although there weren't any others in the state to
No.
look at as models. So that's what you're trying to do now with us.
Yeah.
So we used our form-based code from the town center zone and kind of stretched it out along that corridor and called that our neighborhood heritage district with a few other tweaks. We made some adjustments, but that's essentially what we did. And the planning board was fully behind it, and citizens supported it at the ballot box. Has it worked? The jury is still out. The projects that have come in have been residential, not mixed use, which is what we were expecting. And so they're attracted to the greater density that's allowed in that zone because of the form-based code. So we're having some growing pains with how do we adjust it so that we can achieve the goals without having residential development that's so dense it's out of character with the neighborhood. We are, Vanessa's here, our new town planner today. We're going to be working with her over the next few months to make some tweaks to the Neighborhood Heritage District code to put in front of voters in March. It's anytime you rezone anything, you discover, whoops, we should have done this, or that was just a flat out mistake, nobody caught it in proofreading. There's a couple of those.
The difference between the neighborhood heritage district and the traditional historic district is that the historic district commission is, the geographic area, and there are the rules and the ordinance that states usually fairly strict design standards, tear downs, things like that, to the window, to the paint, and it is a requirement through the ordinance. Whereas a neighborhood district typically is meant to be a little more flexible, talk more about the kind of the form-based and larger design elements like porches or scale and massing, and it's more of an advisory to the planning and zoning board than regulatory.
It's regulatory in the sense that we kept form-based codes, so there are architectural design requirements. There is a separate committee. It doesn't just go to the planning board, it goes to a separate neighborhood heritage district advisory committee.
Which includes two residents.
It includes a representative of the Heritage Commission, a representative of the planning board, a representative from the select board, and then two at-large residents.
Was that,
ZBA there, huh?
Not unless there's a variance that's required. And so it's not, our trouble was that we don't have a downtown. Stratham doesn't have a downtown. Stratham was a farming community. There was never a mill, there was never a village. Well, there's a little.
There's a
No,
sawmill.
when you think of a New England village, we don't have one, never have. And so all of our historical resources are stretched along these country roads. And they've been infilled with the 20th century growth. So we couldn't really justify or even advocate for taking that whole corridor and saying this should be a historic district with regulatory rules. So that's why we went with the neighborhood heritage district model, so that we're trying not to alienate people. We're trying to lead with carrots and a few sticks, but we're trying to offer carrots to go with the sticks and not just say, put the hammer down, these are the rules. So that's why we went in that direction, and I think eventually it's going to work. I'm a farmer, I have to be optimistic. But there is no perfect path. It's not like it's a silver bullet.
sure.
That's your individual communities
Yeah,
that the legislature doesn't recognize,
yeah.
even though they're some.
I just wanted to give everyone a notification of a resource that's available. Our agency for the past about 3 years has been covertly maybe involved in historic preservation through revitalizing or repurposing historic structures wherever that met with creating housing. So for example, Stevens Mill in Franklin is an example, or even the courthouse, we were involved in that in Dover. We put $100 million out to do that. They've got 5,000 units. Right now, we have a funding opportunity. We have $7 million, and it's essentially the same. So if you know of your developer or you know developers in the community, and you want to partner them up with a historic property to do a mixed use or conversion into housing, we have money available. It's only going to be available probably for another, I think it was about 2 weeks, Noah, for the Invest New Hampshire program. So take a look or come see me after if you have any ideas.
Well, thank you. What, last comments?
You had a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll stay for a few minutes, but I think we're ready for lunch.